has two eyes. It has a mouth. It's always open. It has little like horn things out of the head. Hold on, let me just make this a little bit less pointy down here. And it has little arms that are like sticks basically. Little legs like that. Anyways, so the bean is as service beans, being a service to humankind and stuff. It depends on certain individuals they come in contact with. So, yeah. But anyways, this bean was on the adventure, was walking along, I can make the bean a little bit taller to show you kind of the movement of it walking. Let's pretend these trees are even bigger, but, here's the little thing right here. The horns, the eyes, the unibrow, the mouth, walking, like that, just walking along, the motion of walking that way. But anyways, of course there's a backpack on, but you can't really see it, it's right here. But the bean was just walking along, kind of looking down at the rocks and the gravel on the road, and they were kind of big to the bean, kind of like big boulders basically. But there's some parts that were just sand, and they were just walking along, and suddenly they came upon this tiny little stream, which is like a little puddle basically, but like a gribble, I don't know, a drizzle of water. But it wasn't water, it was actually sap from one of these pine trees. The sap was coming down very liquidly like, and flowing down, making a little stream basically into a puddle of sap. But it was clear sap, like transparent almost. So there's like a fog to it in a way. But the bean came up to it and it was like, I'm kind of thirsty, so they started to kind of like, when they go and drink water, they kind of get down on their hands and knees and they take the tiny little tongue and they go like a little dog basically. It's kind of funny to watch, but they will use a cup if they have one, but in most cases their hands are so tiny that they can't really make a cup with them. They would get very little water. They actually get barely any, because the proper amount of water for a bean is a good amount, and the hands they would get nothing basically. I mean, if you take a magnifying glass up to the bean's hands, they're like this little, these very adorable like little starfish, and they go like this. I mean, all hands kind of look like that, but the bean's hands is just too tiny to even get anything. Basically, no water sticks to the hands, basically, if they make a cup. Like this and stuff. But anyways, they went down with their little tiny tongue, and I was like, we can kind of draw it out, what it looks like. So, let's see. Just like a divot. So, the big tree is right here. The sap, there's like a lesion in the tree right here. I think a type of bird came and pecked at it, but it was too solid. And the sap just like ran down here and then filled up this little, I filled up this little bottle basically with sap. So the bean's right here. You can draw it here. Like that. You got a little horn here, unibrow, little tongue, little hand holding themselves up, little knees, they're kneeling on the ground, no tail or anything like that, and the backpack on the back, it's strapped, there's a strap there that goes around, like, comes down here, and goes around the arm, and the other arm, but basically just licking it up, and it was actually quite good, because this was a tree that was like a syrup pine basically, and there was this white, light sugary taste to it. So as they were, and the tongue actually picks up a lot more water than if they were to make a cup with their hands. So a bean tongue is quite cute to look at if they do stick their tongue at you, especially when they're grumpy. was like also some type of like weird looking tunic on. Little legs at the bottom. And is holding a little rope that has two balls on it. Like two stones basically. So the bean just says, "Who are you? What are you doing here? Why did you come up on me? Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?" Blah, 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 blah. And the old bean was like, "Whoa, hold on. Sorry, even I just, I was trying to make out what you were. There was something making a slicking sound. And it's red. I've never seen a bean like you before. Where are you from?" And then the bean was like, "Well, I'm asking you these questions. You have to answer them. I don't know who you are." And the old bean was like, "Well, I'm a magician. And my name is Hector. Nice to meet you. What is your name?" And the bean said, "My name is Bean. Nice to meet you." And Hector was like, "So what brings you to these parts? What were you doing with that transparent looking stuff on the ground? I mean the sap." Oh, and Bean was like, "Well, I was drinking it because I was thirsty and it was sweet." Well, the magician Bean, Hector, was like, "Well, you know that is magical sap, right? And you know what today is. It's Easter." And Bean was like, "Oh." They were kind of thinking in their head. When they thought of Easter, they thought of cakes. Carrot cake. Carrots. Baby carrots. They love baby carrots. They thought of rabbits. And ducklings. And how the ducks used to chase the bean when they were little and try to eat them. And then the bean got kind of mad and put their hands on the hips. We're like, "Well, okay, I guess it's Easter, but what is that? Well, what do you mean about the sap?" Well, the Hector the Bean was like, "Well, the sap is magical, and whoever drinks it will turn into a creature. They will start to basically transform. Like, you remember, we do have werewolves here in this forest, but they don't mess with us because they can't see us. But they're actually humans that are from the human world, and they transform and stuff, but you sometimes see them. They are kind of creepy looking, but they don't harm us because they cannot see us, we're too tiny. Well, but they transform, they start to grow ears on their head, and they start to grow fur slowly. But, so basically, you drank a good amount of that sap, so you might be starting to grow things." Well, and the bean was like, They went over to the sap to look at the reflection, and when they went over there, they had a big pair of ears on their head. Oh my goodness. Well, let's draw this out. Oh, okay, let's see. Let's draw the scenery here. Here is that whole thing with the reflection. The bean looks over it. Sorry, it's not. The bean's not that lumpy. Watch. Hands on the hips. And the bean has grown a pair of ears. Oh my goodness. Back. There's the old bean over here. Long, skinny, malnourished. Well, where's the tunic at? Holding his little set of ball things. Well, the bean cannot believe it. They just grew a pair of ears, and they're furry ears, white furry ears. Oh my gosh. And they're going up and feeling it. It's squishy, like an animal's ears, like the ones that try to chase them when they're little. Oh my goodness. The bean started to freak out. Whoa. How do I change back to a bean? I don't want to turn into an animal. What do I do? And they ran over to the old man, old Bean Hector, and grabbed his tunic and was like shaking him. Like, what did I do? It's fluffy. I don't like this at all. Can I get wet? How do I change back? How do I change back? Nectar's like, well, the only way to change back to a bean again is you have to remove the syrup that's in your system. And the only way to do that is to go to the west end of the forest, where there's a giant cliff. And the bean was like, no, are you saying I have to jump off the cliff? And Hector was like, no. There is an ancient toilet on top of this rock. It is a hole in the rock, and you have to sit on it, and you have to get rid of all the syrup. And the bean was like, oh, well, that doesn't sound too bad. But Hector was like, but you have to have an audience watching you. And the bean was like, what? No, you can't, no. And Hector was like, well, you have to look them in the eyes too while you're doing every single one of them. That is, you are cursed basically right now with turning into an animal. And the only way, the ones who put the spell on this sap tree were some ancient monks who, they loved celebrating Easter very much. And they did not like when people came and licked all the syrup up from the tree, because they would use the syrup to make cakes for Easter, and the ones that would do the licking and stuff, they didn't care about it. They didn't, hunt for Easter eggs and stuff like that. They just walked by it, and sometimes they would spit on the ground, and the monks would mistake the spit for sugar, syrup, and they would use it in their cakes, and it just made the cakes terrible, basically. So, they put a curse on this tree, but it's not like they didn't curse the tree like curse you. They went and they did some type of sacrifice thing, and they sacrificed a onion that they were growing in the garden, and basically the essence of the onion went into the tree, and it wasn't just any onion, it was an onion shaped like an egg. It was a colourful onion. Someone painted it, I think one of the children, the monk beans, painted it. And basically, since it looked like an egg, at the same time, even if it was an onion, it, basically, and I don't know if what animal likes eating onions, but you're gonna turn into that. But actually, I don't think it was an onion. I think it was like a carrot or something. And why I say that, because it was orange, but at the same time, one of the beans, the baby beans, had painted it orange. So who actually knows what kind of vegetable it was? I just know that the tree's cursed, and you're about to turn into something. And well, the bean was like, well, I don't want to turn into anything. I'll go there. I'll suck it up. I will go there, and I'll sit on the toilet, and we call in all the monks and all of them, and I will look at them. And well, Hector was like, well, that you have to actually probably apologize to the monks first, because they might not want to look you in the eyes when you're doing it. Well, Bean was like, I could do that, but alright, I'll apologize to them. Okay, I will. I didn't know though. And then Hector was like, well, that's the thing, you're not from around here and you didn't know, so you just have to tell them that and it should be okay. But you have to do it if you don't want to turn into what you're about to turn into. So the bean was like, alright, but while the bean was thinking about it, suddenly they grew a set of teeth. 2 giant buck teeth. Oh my gosh. They were looking rather, oh my goodness, kind of funny looking. They had a fluffy tail, they had big ears, buck teeth, and they were also starting to grow hair on themselves. Let's draw it out. So, the bean was, had some big ears on their head, is this? And then suddenly, their legs, their feet just grew really big like that. What the heck is this? They were turning into a rabbit, a bunny bean. And Hector was like, I think you're becoming the bunny bean. And, Bean was like, oh, I don't like this at all. But Bean still had the little horns though on the side. Here is the old, Hector. He's an email nearest. Oh, I keep forgetting to draw the tunic. Hold on. Sorry. And, Hector's holding thing with. We still don't know what those are, but Hector's kind of looking. Well, so, what else? Okay. But, so the Bean was like, I need to do this immediately, and I think I have to go to the bathroom, so this is perfect. How far away is this mountain with the toilet? And Hector was like, well, it's about 10 feet away. In human, so it's right over there. She's right over there on that ledge. Oh, okay. So the Bean was like, alright. I'm gonna do this. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm not from around here, so nobody knows who I am. Well, and Hector was like, the village of the monks is right over there. And there was literally a little fire going on and a bunch of houses to the left. And the Bean was like, well, why didn't I see this before? And then Hector was like, well, you are very tiny, and, we just have to walk over there. And the Bean was like, yeah, I guess so. Well, when the Bean took a step, it was a hop. Oh my goodness. The cutest sight. The Bean was hopping, and you're like, what the heck, I can't even walk. And then it was like, boing, boing, boing. And let's draw it out. It's like this, and the boing, 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 and here's the Bean here. They're not that big, but they got the long feet, little hands, they got the big ears, and they got the little tail. And oh my gosh, it was a red Bean with white ears, white tail, kind of white feet, and they were just bounding. And the Hector was walking along. I keep forgetting the tunic. Just walking along with this thing with ball things on it. But anyways, they were just walking along, and Bean was bounding. But anyways, eventually they got to the village, and Bean was already becoming not red anymore and just white. It was making the Bean look pink, basically. The Bean was basically a pink bean. A pink fuzzy rabbit bean. And, they were slowly starting to turn into a bunny. So that meant they couldn't really communicate, but they forgot the tunic again, but the skinny one, the skinny old Hector, the ball thing, and then here's Bunny Bean. Oh, strange looking, never mind. But anyways, Bunny Bean got up to the beans, these three little monks. It's like, look, and was trying to speak, but had huge buck teeth, and they were like, the bean was like, look, I accidentally ate your syrup. And the bean was making like chewing noises, and the bean was getting mad and was like, oh, what the heck? And started cursing. I can't curse, but they were saying some pretty bad things, and they're spitting as well. And they look, I ate your syrup. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Huge buck teeth, the funniest sight ever. And the little monks started giggling underneath the tunics, and tunics under the tunics. I mean, it could have been eunuchs as well, but they were giggling. They were just like, they're kind of bouncing when they giggled. And the bean was like, what the heck? Look, I'm going to go to the ledge over there, and I need the whole village to come with me, because I need to get rid of this curse. And the little beans kind of chuckled, and they all looked at each other, but when beans look at each other, they can't turn their necks because they don't have any. They turned their whole bodies, and they kind of looked at each other, and they nodded, and then they looked back at Bean, and was like, and they nodded at Bean, and Bean was like, oh, okay, with the big buck teeth, huge buck teeth, and one of the tiny little baby beans walked over to Bean. It was like, look, there's a bunny rabbit here, and Bean was like, oh, I'm not a bunny rabbit. I was getting all worked up, and the little bean gave Bean a carrot, and Bean was getting really mad. He was very upset. Nectar was like, calm down. We're gonna get the crowd, and we're gonna go to the mountaintop. And then, as Bean was like hopping, boing, boing, boing to the mountain, the little tiny children were running after the Bean, trying to give him carrots, and Bean was, oh my goodness, so grumpy. The little eyebrows were just very unibrowed, a grumpy unibrowed. And Bean did turn around and stick the tongue out. It was very difficult though, the huge buck teeth were in the way. And, did the blowing like, I can't make the sound, it's a little too loud. But, well, the Bean did that, they were sputtering spit everywhere, and the little children were laughing, like, oh my gosh, this bunny is so funny. And Bean was getting even more mad. But eventually, they got to the cliff, and let's draw it out. It was like, let's see, like this, and then it went down into a ditch, basically. And there's water down here. Excuse me. And there's like this little tube-looking thing right here. Excuse me. So, all the, let's draw them out. We have 1 monk, 2 monk, 3 monk, Hector right here. Oh my gosh, Unique forgot. They got the little, you can only see their eyes, feet. There's a little baby one here, Bean, and another one watching. They have carrots and they're throwing it at Bean. And Bean's up here. Right here. Huge bunny ears. Poofy tail. Sitting on the ground over the hole. Very mad. Very upset. And the Bean's like, alright. facing the water. Well, we'll get to it. Finally, the bean was like, alright, let's go. And was squeezing, just like, on the toilet at home, which is a hole in the bean's house. And it just, bang, everything just came out of this tube and fell right into the water. A couple turds came out too, like pellets, basically. The bean was like, whoa, what is this? Oh my gosh. And then suddenly just a green lightning bolt came out of the sky and came down and hit the bean with such extreme force that it ripped every single bunny-like attribute from the bean's skin. But no, there's no blood or anything like that. And it was just like, just exploded. And suddenly the bean was back to being a red bean again. Oh my gosh, they touched themselves, they went everywhere, they felt around on the head. I'm back to being normal, yes. And then the bean just kind of like looked around, and the impact of the explosion was so big that it knocked down all the beans. They all fell over, and it was kind of cute. They were like getting up and stuff, kind of stumbling around. And Hector was the only one standing. And Hector walked up to the bean and was like, "You did it, Bean. You faced your fears. You dislike public, looking people in the eyes and stuff. Because when you were shaking me, you were looking at the mole on my face. And I didn't really like when you were looking at it because you were looking at it very intently, and it had a couple of hairs sticking out of it. And that is my biggest insecurity and stuff. But you did it, Bean. You looked everyone in the eyes and you did it. And look, you're back to being normal. And you see all that water there? That is actually pee or syrupy from all the other creatures that turned into creatures. And they had to do the same thing, but they didn't really turn back, basically. You see that pen over there with all the animals? Well, those were all actually once beans and other, things. But it didn't work on them because they weren't really sorry for what they did. But you were sorry. And, eventually we're gonna try it again and try to get them, I think they probably do want to turn back, but maybe not. They're not. They're kind of like NPCs, basically. Creatures and stuff like that. They kind of just, anyways. But yeah, all that is pee and poo. So, you don't want to jump in there. Well, one of the baby beans fell in there the other week, and we had to fetch them out. And they were just very upset and very stinky for a long time. But anyways, so you did it, Bean. You're back to being normal again, and you can go on with your mission, whatever you're doing. Just remember, don't touch it. Just ask before you drink anything or anything like that, or eat anything. Just look around, see if there's a village somewhere, and there's no curses on them. And the way to check to see if there's a curse is you take this little ball, these two balls, and it was the two. I'll just draw it right here. The thing Guild Hector had with these two ball things. You take them and you go like this, and they hit together, and that will tell you the sound of the balls hitting each other. They'll give off a certain ding. You have to put the syrup or the liquid or any food on the ends of them, and you go like this, and that will, if it's like a high-pitched ding, it is safe. If it's a low-pitched, like it is cursed. So I use this wherever I go, but I'm giving it to you because you're not afraid